Welcome to Beanstalk, M&J's podcast where we are sharing and showcasing our areas of expertise through conversations with practice leaders on their knowledge and experience.
Welcome back to Beanstalk. Today, I'm very excited to take a little bit of a deeper dive into one of our newer service lines, the name, image, and likeness, the NIL service advisory. And we're going to be talking today with two members of that team, Don Van Landingham from Guardian Wealth Management, our wealth management arm, and Nick Ryder, a tax partner who leads a lot of the tax efforts for the NIL services. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excited about being here.
Yeah, and welcome back, Don.
Yeah.
For the listeners who may not have heard your first Guardian Wealth podcast, can you give us a little background on what you do, what Guardian does, and
Sure. I'm a CPA financial planner. I've been doing this in some form or fashion for over 40 years. Probably don't look like it, but I have been. And what I'm really excited about talking about today is helping other student athletes, because when I was a student athlete back in the day, and I made every mistake in the book as a kid. And so want to help others not make the same mistakes.
what the listeners probably don't know, what we didn't know until just a few minutes ago, was that you actually played football with my dad.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So knowing my dad, I'm sure he made same number of mistakes.
Hey, what happens there? What happens there stays there.
Those mistakes.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, it's a great opportunity to make sure that student athletes understand, especially in this landscape. Hey, these are the things you need to be looking out for, need to be thinking of, and so I'm excited to kind of talk through that a little bit more, and want to welcome for the first time Nick Ryder to the podcast, the tax partner here.
Yeah.
Can you talk through a little bit of your background and some of the NIL?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm excited to be here for the first time. And so unlike Don, I wasn't a student athlete, but like both of y'all, I made some mistakes in college, and I'm used to that process. But I do know tax, and one of the things that we've seen with our clients is we work with a lot of new business owners that are starting out, and that's really at the end of the day what we're talking about. All the NIL, the name, image, and likeness, and we're watching football, we're watching all these college sports, and it's flashy and it's fun to watch. But at the end of the day, we're talking about an entrepreneurial spirit. We're starting businesses. We're getting that started now, and with these young kids who are getting something started that's going to last them for the future. And so it's really fun to watch that and to help them through that process. And we're taking the same things that we've learned with clients and every other industry that we work with, and we're applying it here, and it works the exact same. So really excited about that, and looking forward to the conversation today.
Right. Yeah, and I think mistakes is a good place to start, right? Because we kind of NIL in general, like it's had its kind of ebbs and flows, and are we paying players? Are we not? And it's kind of been referred to as the Wild West, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like, hey, players, student athletes, they're hearing all sorts of things. And so it really is, the mistakes, everything kind of translates to the financial side as well, right? So when a student athlete kind of comes in with an NIL deal or a potential NIL deal, like where in the process, Don, from your side, what is a good starting point? What is a good first, step for them to take with us that allows them to kind of see, hey, this is your path forward? Can you kind of explain your process a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we start off with what we call their financial roadmap, and this is where they get to tell me their story and and I love how Nick said about their future is going to be CEO of the rest of their life. And I want them to look at that as their own business enterprise and be the CEO of that. And so it's really a listening exercise on my end to get them talking about what's important to them so that they can get clarity and give me clarity of what's really most important to them, mm-hmm. and really kind of chart the course of what their future, what they want that to look like.
And what does that horizon look like? I mean, we're not just talking about, hey, you got 4 years as a student athlete in college, maybe NFL, maybe not. I mean, what kinds of things are you looking at on the horizon for them, or is it a full 4-year plan? Is it a life plan, or something in between?
It's a life plan. I never want to kill their dreams if their dreams is to go NFL. But the reality is, only about 1.5% of all college athletes go further. And especially as we're talking about college football, NFL, and so forth. So that's like every draft, there's like 250 people drafted out of 15,000.
Yeah.
So I'd never want to kill that dream, but yet I do want them to think further than that.
You've got to take practical steps
Yes.
in the event of. I mean, it's like anything. It's like, what are the risk rewards? What are the variables and things to be thinking about, right?
Yeah, there's a saying, and college football coaches taught me this: you don't know what you don't know, right? And so a big part of what we want to do is educate them, because finance is the same way. You don't know what you don't know.
And I assume parents are part of this. I mean, what is the conversation with them like? What do they need to be thinking about as their kids go through this?
Yeah, a big part of my goal is really just to reiterate what the parents have been telling their kids from the get-go also, and really be a support for them and build that trust with both the parents and the student athlete, that we've got their back.
Obviously, everybody here has been in college and been 19 years old before. I mean, how do you help balance that desire to spend the money versus, hey, we have to plan for the future? I mean, is it an easy conversation? Are there how do you help with that?
Yeah, you have to be direct, don't you? Yeah. And so one of the required for them to be a client with us is for them to sit down with their parents. Remember the ESPN documentary Broke? It was on 30 for 30. And so much that's a precautionary tale and this is about professional athletes and who are older than these student athletes are. So I want them to watch that with their parents, and a lot of the eye-opening things come out of there. One is 78% of NFL players are either in bankruptcy or close to bankruptcy 2 years after their NFL playing days are over.
Yeah.
That's a shocking statistic.
Shocking.
And so I want to kind of shock in all these young men and to not let that happen to them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, financial literacy is obviously a big part of that, and Guardian Wealth helps them kind of develop that literacy, so to speak. I mean, are you working with them?
Yeah, you're not going to do it in one meeting, of course. So the first meeting is to get their vision. And we actually talk, all right, what's your vision? And then the second step would be to hire us to put a written financial game plan together. And so we're in that is going to be a budget. And that's where we bring Nick and the tax professionals in to calculate the taxes, and Nick can talk about that. And then we want them to pay themselves first. So after the taxes are taken care of, we want them to start building up savings and even start an investment portfolio, and then figure out how to live off the rest of that. Obviously, we're not going to make them put every penny into savings or taxes or whatever, but I want to get them into a routine, a habit of paying themselves first.
Yeah, and that probably resonates with them, right? I mean, you're talking about people who, they're potential, future athletes in the NFL, NBA, whatever. Like they've probably committed to a routine or something to get them where they are now. So it's kind of the same in life, right? Like you kind of have to establish your process, trust your process and work through the same struggles, right, on the financial side. Absolutely.
They wouldn't have got to where they got if they didn't understand the right habits and the routines and so forth. And finance is exactly the same way.
And Don, expanding on financial literacy, let's kind of talk with, how often you're talking to your clients to monitoring their goals, staying true to their goals that y'all define in the financial roadmap. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Brian. So they don't just come in, meet us one time, and then we're one and done, and they don't hear from us anymore. This is a relationship type of business, of course. And so we are continually having conversations, especially at the front end. There's a lot of work to be done because we call it get your financial house in perfect order. And there's a lot of work it takes to do that. So we're continually communicating. But once that first wave of work is done, we have quarterly meetings, usually either in person or Zoom or sometimes rarely a phone call, but I like to see their face. I like them to see me, look them in the eyes, kind of hear where they're at on everything, and then give them updates of where they're at, which gives me the chance to not just hold them accountable, but teach them the basic fundamentals of success for not just financial, but just as help them grow into the man that their parents want them to grow into.
Yeah, so that seems like a good cadence, and you can kind of update their goals accordingly, right?
Yeah. So they get a pretty simple report. Here's what you started with on your investments and so forth. Here's how much you saved since the last time we met. Here's what your investments grew or went back temporarily during that time. Here's what you ended it with. Here's your return for the quarter. Here's the return since you started. And that's just on the investment piece,
Sure.
But also going through the other big pieces of their finance. Where are we at on getting your wills put together, your power of attorneys, your health care power, all of those kind of things. Where are we at on your insurance? And just giving them updates.
Yeah.
And then the other part, and this is where we really make sure Nick and his team is involved, especially as we're getting close to the end of the year, we want to have a tax planning meeting so that there's no surprises by the time they file their tax return. So we have an estimate. Here's what it looks like your income is. Here's what your taxes look like they're going to be. Here's what you've paid in. Here's what you'll end up owing when you file your return.
Yeah, and that's what I like, the no surprises piece of that, right?
Yeah.
And talking quarterly or however often to keep the client comfortable, keep the student athlete comfortable in this instance, right? That's very important.
Extremely.
Yeah. And so shifting gears to another member of the team, right? The tax team or the financial team. Nick, let's kind of dive into what student athletes need to be considering as they're getting going, as they're entering these NIL deals. A lot of them are set up as kind of independent contractors, meaning hey, they're kind of responsible for everything, right? The tax payments, everything. So what can you explain to our listeners? What does that mean to be an independent contractor, and what are some of the advantages? What are some of the disadvantages of that kind of initial setup?
Yeah, and I'll go into that. I want to make a couple of points real quick first, because I think what's really important, and Don, I really like what you said earlier. You said that we got to listen to them, right? That's part of this entire thing. We need to listen to what they want, and taxes are going to play a huge role in that because taxes are going to come off the top, right? I mean, that's one of the first larger expenses that they're going to have. So we do need to listen. We need to come up with that plan and put a stake in the ground, as the way I usually phrase it, 10 years out. And then that way we've got something that we are striving for. We've got a destination so that we're not arbitrarily making tax decisions just based on what's right in front of us right now. Because I think that's where people really get in trouble, is they see a tax number and they say, I've got to get that number down, right? And so they'll do anything they can to get that number down, but they're not thinking about the consequences of that decision.
I always say this, right? You don't want the tax tail wagging the dog.
Exactly, yeah. And there are so many tax decisions that can be made that drive this enterprise in the wrong direction. And so to get back to one of your other questions, another thing that I think is really important to talk about that we've been seeing with a lot of these students is they're filing their tax return for the first time. I've reached out to a couple that I say, hey, send me a copy of your prior year return so we can get everything going. Like, they've never filed a tax return. So, it kind of resonates that this is the first time they've seen a 1040 or, a 1120S or whatever it may be. And so we really have to start from the ground level and work up. So, but to get back to your question about the contractor. So, they're going to be a contractor in all essence with the college. And so there are a lot of considerations to have here. And I don't know how deep into the weeds. I'm sure you'll have some questions to kind of break up as I get into it. But, one of the most important things is they're going to get a 1099. They're going to be a contractor when they start working or whenever they get this contract set up. And the tax structure, if you just look at that, they're going to have their personal return, and then they're going to pay self-employment tax. That's honestly the first thing that I think about is if I'm a 1099 contractor, I'm going to have a business on my personal return, and I'm going to pay self-employment tax.
In addition to income tax, right?
In addition,
I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is, hey, it's not just income tax. It is self-employment tax. It's state and local tax, right? So
Absolutely.
There are a lot of considerations that just off the top, Don, to your point, it's just like, well, we want to pay ourselves first, but the government's going to take their piece.
Exactly.
And so how do we set up for that in a useful way, with estimated payments or tax structuring or whatever?
Exactly.
What are the first things you're telling clients, hey, these are the things we need to be aware of. These are the options we have.
Yeah, that's another good point. And I want to kind of put some numbers to this too. I think that'll help. So when we're talking about self-employment tax, we're talking about 15%, give or take, of the amount of net income that they get from these businesses. So it's not just a contractor, the 1099 that they get, but net of expenses and other costs associated. But 15% there for self-employment tax, and then you've got your income tax. And I took a couple of numbers. Now, look, I don't memorize tax brackets. I've learned long ago we don't need to memorize tax brackets. So I do have a couple of notes.
Software's good for something.
Yeah, it really is. But the point I want to make on this is, like I said, you've got a lot of people who are going to file their tax returns for the first time. They're going to be filing single. And when we're talking about some of these NIL contracts, they get up in 50, 70, 100,000, 200,000, 500,000 really quick. And so not only do you have the self-employment tax piece of that, but you also have your income tax. And as a single individual taxpayer, you're hitting those brackets really quickly, respectively, compared to a married filing joint. But so, for instance, you're going to hit the 24% bracket on all of your other income at $103,000. Most NIL contracts that we're seeing are close to that already. Right. Now you've got some other things that are coming into that'll lower it, but you're in the 24% bracket really quick. You hit 32% at 197. How many have we seen come through more than that? You're in the 35% bracket at 250. And so you're hitting those, and then you add 15% on top of that, you're talking about 50% of the income. Going to taxes, and you need to know that number.
Yeah, and if you're in a state where your taxes, add another 5% to that. So
100%.
It's and the 15% self-employment is obviously kind of gets capped at 180 or 200,000, and then it's kind of more 4% after that. But if you're in the highest bracket and you're self-employed, well, you're still paying 45%. Right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think that's what people don't understand is that that's a big chunk. And so, are there some strategies to, once you get to a level where it makes sense, right, to start, talking about ways to reduce either self-employment or, just retirement planning, things like that. I mean, when does that conversation start?
Yeah, and I think what a lot of people would do, kind of reactionary, is they'll see this contractor work come in and they'll say, I'm going to make an S corp. That's kind of what you hear now. It's we're going to do S corps. I see YouTube videos of S corp tax secrets that you're not using, and so we see that a lot. But I do look at, so you asked earlier, what are kind of the first few things you're going to look at? I'm going to look at the NIL contract first. I want to know what dollar amounts are we working with. Because as a service provider, as a business where you're providing a service, you're not going to have a lot of equipment. We're not going to have, all these elaborate expenses. We're going to have some travel, some meals, some entertainment, but those are limited. But so I'm going to look at the contract first, and then depending on the level of income. So depending on who you talk to, that conversation's a little different, but I usually run, if I've got net income from a business around 180,000, and we can talk about why I think that's the number. But $180,000 of net income from this business or this enterprise, I'm going to want to make an S election. I'm going to want to decide, I'm going to make an S corp election. I'm going to start filing a separate tax return. And I don't know how much detail you want to get into on that number.
Before we go down that road, let's just talk about, tax. There's tax strategy, there's legal strategy, right? I mean, talk about the difference between LLCs, I guess, and S corps. What's different? What's the same? If that makes sense. I mean, you can be an LLC and also be an S corp. Like, why is an LLC important in this whole thing? From a legal perspective, but also a tax perspective.
Yeah, that's great. And I think the way we're even going through this conversation is exactly how I would go through it with somebody who's coming in with a contract like this, right? It's you start to try to fix the problems, but we don't even go through why we need to fix the problem in the first place. And so, I think an LLC conversation is really important because when I've got a business, one of the biggest concerns that I have in that business is actually outside of the tax conversation entirely, and that's my liability. And what type of liability do I carry with me with the actions that I have and what I do? And so when I have this contract, I'm recommending to student athletes to set up an LLC just for liability protection.
Right.
Now, the LLC is a state designation. For federal tax purposes, you can be an S corp, a partnership, a sole proprietor as an LLC. And so you have some options there from a tax perspective. But legally, I want that LLC protection. I want to set up some protections there.
Well, I think it is. Yeah, it's just like, well, what duties are you performing as part of your brand? And what exposures are there? Well, an LLC kind of somewhat encapsulates or isolates the risk to your LLC. And Don, maybe you can weigh in here too, right? I mean, there is an element of risk because you're kind of turning into a business enterprise. So, the conversation can't always be tax. It's, hey, to a degree, am I insured? Am I protected personally for the things that I'm doing? Do I need insurance for, certain things that I'm doing in NIL? I mean, how often does that come up in a conversation, or does that kind of happen, down the road?
It's usually the first question the parents ask, frankly, of how can we protect our son or daughter from all that's out there, because we see every day in the newspaper this athlete got in trouble or getting sued or whatever. So it's the real world, and so that's part of the conversation. And I go back to what Nick said when we first started. You're CEO of your company. You're an entrepreneur. Think that way, and risk management is a big part of that.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot of students that it's really easy for them to think about this NIL thing as what they do on the field.
Yeah.
But they are building a brand. They've got a business at this point, and it's based on them. And I think that's one of the things that just because they step off the field doesn't mean that NIL business goes away. And so literally everything they do is under the microscope. And so you want liability protection. You want this coverage over you to make sure that you're protected when you're out living your life and not just on the field. Right. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, the tax issues aside, and financial issues aside, it's just like I want to just be protected just legally right away. And so, I think it's generally the rule of thumb is going to be, well, let's get the assets into an LLC where we can so that you're protected personally. And then it kind of the conversation, at least from a tax perspective, will shift, right? So
exactly.
Maybe go into a little more detail now. It's like, all right, well, I've got my LLC.
Okay.
What does it mean to me now from a tax perspective, how that LLC is taxed, kind of maybe dig in a little more detail on the S election and what that means.
So, and I think we can kind of look at this as a case study. Okay, I'm a student athlete. I've got my LLC. Now what? Now what do we do? You mentioned the S corp earlier. Why do I need that? How do we get there? And so I'll go back to my $180,000 number. I'm going to keep that on the table here for a minute. And the reason why, there's a couple of different things to think about. If we don't make any sort of election, if we just create an LLC and run that as a sole proprietorship, single member LLC, it's called a couple of different things, but we file the activity on the personal return. We're going to be subject to self-employment tax. And we mentioned that earlier. That's at 15%. But if I set up an S corp, I'm able to move that income off of my personal return, and I'm filing a separate business tax return. And I'm able to protect some of that income from that self-employment tax. Now, there's a couple of things here, and I think it's really important because you hear that and you're like, oh, well, why doesn't everybody have an S corp?
Right.
Why wouldn't everybody just set that up? It seems like a no-brainer. I can move all this, and why 180? I'll do it at 100,000, right? And so you kind of start getting into this rhythm. But a couple of things on that. So one, once you set up that S corp, once you set up a separate entity, and you are the CEO, like Don said, you're now an officer of the company, and the IRS requires you to pay a reasonable salary. And so that's when we really start to get into conversations, because now not only do you have another business tax return that you're filing, You're having to do payroll. And like Don said, we're going to set up payroll anyway, likely, but you're required to do it at this point. And you have to pay a reasonable salary. Your income's got to be a certain level at the W-2. And once you're paying yourself a W-2, you're essentially paying self-employment tax anyway. And so, without a whiteboard here, I could walk through all the numbers and kind of show, but around 180 is where that break-even
good rule
point.
of thumb, at least.
Exactly.
And I think what else is important in there is, well, when you're an S corp versus just a single member LLC, where all your earnings are taxed as self-employment. Well, now retirement planning becomes a different discussion too, right? And
Correct.
And that's where I like, kind of the division of duties with M&J and Guardian Wealth, right? I mean, we're also always constantly talking to each other. Well, if we do this, then we can't do that, or we have to, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page and the working together and kind of painting the whole picture, not just the picture in a 1-year vacuum.
Exactly.
And developing that roadmap, I think has been great to see. Right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and because I've also seen where clients, and again, what we're talking about here is just another business. And I don't want to say it like that to diminish it, but it's a business. And so we see business planning go sideways like this all the time, where I have a client who, maybe 1 year they have $300,000 of income on a Schedule C or on their single member LLC. And they look up and say, hey, I think it's better for me to be an S corp. Well, this is the only year you've had $300,000 of net income in the last 10 years. And next year you're going to be at $50,000. You're going to create a problem if we don't think about this long term. And so I think it's important to know where you're going, what's coming up, not just react. Like you said, we're not reacting. We want to be proactive and think through what's coming up.
yeah. Well, dovetailing, a life plan with a roadmap while you're in college with what you expect after college. I mean, it all fits into one giant puzzle. So, and that's what I think we're trying to do, right? Is we're trying to, get all the pieces of the puzzle we can into place and just deal with the variables and leave some flexibility for the future to make sure you can accomplish your goals. Is that a fair statement?
Very fair.
Absolutely.
And as Nick alluded, it's very complicated. Right. And so part of our job as their advisors is to simplify that down for them. So there might be certain income levels where a retirement plan may not make sense from a tax standpoint, but I want to get them more into the habits of it and teaching them fundamentals. So almost every student athlete that we work with, we set them up a SEP plan, which is like a self-employed retirement plan for their business. And I want to get them into the habit of putting money into that. And that allows me to teach them how compound interest grows, pay yourself first, and the magic of compound interest and so forth. So that's a big part of the piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I think that's a good dive into kind of the general rules of thumb on the tax side. I mean, obviously, as you grow, your complexities are going to grow. I mean, do you want to speak to any more other things to be thinking about as they grow? I mean, there's kind of what everybody calls the jock tax, right? Where you may, if you're doing services in multiple states, maybe you're getting hit by multiple states. So just other things maybe ancillarily to be aware of.
Yeah, and another thing that I was thinking through, Donis is talking about the retirement plans and things like that. I think another thing that we see sometimes that can trip people up is once you set up some of these retirement plans, a lot of people want to hire friends and family that are close to them, and they bring in other employees that can create issues with retirement plans. There's so many pieces of this that work together and work in concert with each other that, one misstep here could create a problem that you're not expecting. And so working through that. But the state issue is a great example of one of those things that, as these athletes travel across the country, especially now the way that, and I know we keep talking about football, but it's every sport, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's easiest as kind of
No disrespect.
No, absolutely not. I know baseball travels, volleyball travels, everything, but football is kind of the primary. But you see these schools playing games all over the country. And so there are going to be, and professional athletes also playing all over the country, you're going to see these states won't to tax the income that's earned while they're playing in that state. And I think, it's so easy for us to talk about. Even earlier, I was talking about tax rates and I mentioned all the federal, and I didn't even mention the state. It's so easy to just kind of let the state fall to the wayside. But some of your states have significant tax rates that are going to be paid and are going to be required. And as these student athletes travel to different states and play, there's a requirement on some of them to pay tax and file tax returns in these states. And so it's important for them to know what the implications are, where they're going.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take a step back and just look at the NIL landscape, right? I mean, there's so much money involved, and certain states are going to want to reach out and try and grab a portion of that, and whether a state does that or not. I mean, I think you'll see a lot of that evolve as the NIL landscape continues to evolve, and it's. I'll plug M&J's state and local practice. I mean, they're on top of it, and so it's something that you have to continuously monitor because the rules change all the time.
Mm-hmm. And another thing to think about too with the NIL that's different than maybe a lot of businesses is that it's public. It's out there. I mean, and I don't think we like to think about it because it makes sound a little paranoid. But you've got revenue agents sitting there watching TV that see
your contracts.
They see contracts. They see a game being played in their state. The information's out there. It's available, and so things can be found much easier when it's public like that.
Yeah. So I mean, lots of things to be thinking about. Obviously, we're here to help where we can.
Absolutely.
Just kind of taking a step back from tax and just thinking about the athlete, right? I mean, as they're, anything else we need to be thinking about for them as they, not from a legal perspective or anything like that, but or if a student transfers schools or like what have you seen any issues that arise from that, or just what from a student athlete perspective, like how do we keep their kind of headspace okay?
One of the things, Brennan, I really like about doing the financial roadmap with these student athletes is they articulate their vision of what they want their life to look like. And so a big part of my coaching leadership with them is to keep bringing them back to that. Because once you get crystal clear on your vision, your decisions should be more black and white and not emotional. So I'm always bringing them back to the roadmap on what's really important to them, which helps them make those decisions with their long-term future in mind instead of shooting from the hip.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and you go back to your point about, hey, I might want friends and family as part of my business. Well, it's like that's probably part of the roadmap of just, hey, let's figure out who you want to take care of, how you want to take care of them. Like it all just kind of interplays, right?
Absolutely. Well, it also kind of like, well, you didn't talk about taking care of all this in our road. Are you sure that's really what you want to do now? Right. And it just kind of brings them zeroed back in. Well, what am I really trying to accomplish here? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think another thing to watch for is, we talk about tax, we talk about the planning, we talk about just sports in general. And again, I want to keep going back to the fact that this is a business enterprise. This is an entity. This is a real world business that they're creating, and the contracts that they're signing are real contracts. I mean, this is real world stuff. Mm-hmm. And what we've seen crop up with some colleges is, hey, you're signing a contract. We're paying you a lot of money. We expect that contract to be adhered to. And we've seen things in contracts related to personal activities, character, all sorts of things that say, if you're out doing things outside of your time playing ball or doing whatever sport it is, and we're not happy with that, that's in violation of this contract. What the student athlete needs to understand is when they sign on that dotted line, you are now representing a college more than probably you were in the past. Not only are you wearing a uniform, but you're also getting paid. Yeah. And that changes the landscape of that conversation with the school at that point, because now it's money involved, and that changes the conversation. Yeah. So it's a little bit more specific.
Great. That's a great point, Nick. And so even putting them in an LLC does not protect them from all of that, right?
Exactly, because as soon as you sign that contract,
yes,
you're in, and your LLC is the one.
Yeah. So you better not spend all that money. So saving some of that, and also making sure we have the right insurance. Most student athletes, a lot of them get by their first car. with some of this money. Well, those, as we know, those cars are big. You're driving liability, and so having proper car insurance, umbrella coverage on top of the basic car insurance and all that, and that costs money. And so it's an eye-opening thing for, I mean, just the taxes like Nick was talking about, that could be half of your contract.
Yeah.
And so then we're only working with the other half, and we got to pay for this and that and whatever. And, there's not as much as they think is left over for fun things. And so this is a very much an adult, again, back to the CEO of your business conversation.
Yeah. Well, they grow up so fast, right?
Yeah.
As a result of this.
They have to.
So it is that. I mean, that's another reason I like this is the goal is to try and take as much off your plate so you can focus on what you need to focus on. Right.
Yeah.
And so, I think we preach this on pretty much every podcast, just getting the right team in place.
Absolutely.
To help you and guide you and, just advise you on where you want to go and hold you accountable sometimes too. Right. So I think that's where I like this service so much.
Yeah, and I think another thing, and not to turn this into a podcast about the portal, but we see a lot of students transferring all the time.
Yeah.
And what we've seen in these contracts is, hey, if you leave, and we've seen colleges and universities pull back this money and say, you're owing us all this money back, whether it was paid or not. And so again, just having that right team, because I can look at a contract and I give you my thoughts, but having an attorney to go over that contract and really deep dive into that, having the financial advising, the wealth management, the tax, that team is extremely important so that the student athlete can focus on what they do best and what got them to this point in the first place.
That's right.
Yep.
Don, anything to add?
I think he said it best. I think I like the accountability, the leadership. That's a very big part of it, so they can stay focused on what they need to stay focused on.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the whole goal is hey, focus on what got you here, do what you do best, and we're here to help you along the way. So if there's any other one piece of advice that you may have to offer or the first step once you get an NIL offer in your hand, do you have one? Or?
Yeah, one thing that I want to say, because as we're sitting here talking, I'm nervous. Right, I feel nervous to get a contract. If there's a student athlete out there who's gotten a contract, be excited.
Yeah.
And I think Donna, I'm sure you go through that in the conversation. Enjoy it. Be excited about it. It's a super. I mean, we were talking about earlier. You put all this effort, all this work to get here. Be excited. Enjoy it. But also turn it into something. Don't just let it fizzle out. Don't let it be a flash in the pan. Use it. Turn it into something that you can use for the rest of your life and build on top of that, I think is really important. Use this as a foundation for everything that you're going to do going forward. Yep. And at that point, the world is yours. I mean, you can do whatever you want. And, that's the American dream, right? Yeah. I mean, that's what we're here trying to do. And so I just think enjoy it, be excited about it, but be careful and make sure that you're working through and you're building the right team. You've got the right advisors around you so that you're making the right decisions going forward.
Well, I think that goes back to our original NIL podcast when we were introducing this. It's just, hey, you're kind of developing a team, not just for NIL, but for life, right?
Absolutely.
Whatever endeavors you go on. Well, now you got some trusted people to work through it with you forever. It's not it's not just about your playing career. It's like we care about you as a person. We want to see you succeed as a person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just add to what Nick said. Stay true to yourself too. I think that's a big part of my job is to remind them of that because they're getting bombarded by a lot of different things, and so a big part of my job I think is to keep them grounded. And stay true to yourself. And the other thing I would say is if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. It probably is. And so to remind them of sticking to the fundamentals too.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you both for joining us. I enjoyed this very much. Amazing that you and my dad played together.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Outrageous. But.
I'm scared of what he's going to say.
The first text I'm going to send, right? So, but yes, for the listeners, thank you for joining us. If you do have questions, please reach out to Don or Nick or visit our website at mjcpa.com. Thank you for joining us.